Hi there, wonderful person. I'm me, you are you. This is Clean Code Block Interview Question. Employees with the same birth month. We're finally doing it. We're tackling our hard problem in PostgreSQL. Let's get into it. All right, so our problem statement reads, identify the number of employees within each department that share the same birth month. Your output should list the department, birth month, and the number of employees from that department who were born in that month. If a month has no employees born in it within a specific department, report this month as having 0 employees. The profession column stores the department names of each employee. As far as problem statements go, this one is actually pretty involved, but we're going to break it down further in the notebook to kind of piece out what we actually need to do and how we're going to go ahead and get it done. So if we go ahead and look at our table, we only have one table, wonderful, but we have birthday, birth month, employee ID, profession, last name, first name as our columns. We come over here, we look at everything. We've already extracted the birth month out of the birthday. That's going to save us a ton of time. And that's like the little help that this problem is giving you, because this is very clearly an on-site interview question that is trying to assess your ability to handle a curveball thrown at you in the process. My best guess, talking to people at Block, this is in like, if you have 6 interview questions to do, this is number 4 or 5. This is something where they're trying to see, after working through a bunch of complex problems, can you handle some difficulty? Okay, I do think it's solvable. I do think it's going to be a bit of a pain to do in SQL, but hey, that's life. Let's go ahead and jump over to the notebook and see what we're working with. Okay, we have a big block of text here in our problem statement. Let's go ahead and highlight, what we actually need to be solving for. We need a number of employees within each department share the same birth month. Okay. In terms of output, we're going to do that in a different color. They want it in department, birth month, number of employees. And finally, we have a problem consideration. If a month has no employees born in it, reported as having 0. Finally, this last column here, we don't actually need, it just tells us profession holds the department name. So when we come down, we don't need employee ID. Obviously, that's like a foreign key from the table. We also don't need birthday because we have birth month. We need profession, and we don't need last name, and we don't need first name. So now let's take a look at the helper functions that are going to be available to us to solve this problem. Okay, we have sorted out our problem statement. We have sorted out what data we're going to be using. Let's now sort out what functions we can use to help us solve the problem. Now, I will say the official solution overcomplicates what we're doing here. I don't think we need to make it complex in terms of computation. It's just going to be rather dull. And it's not going to look very pretty, but there's really no way to iteratively do things in SQL. It's just a fundamental limitation of the language. So to get around that, we're going to use a case when function, and a case when is going to allow us to look through a column, and it's going to say, hey, if this is the element value in the column, element value, then we're going to make it something else. And it's a quickly way to kind of group things together, but you actually can't summate them together. You need to wrap it inside of a sum function in this case. You could use an average, you could use whatever operation you wanted. A case when will just say, hey, if then in SQL. Now, this problem, I want to draw it out visually, my kind of thinking on how we're going to solve this. So if this is our block of data from block, fittingly, the first partition we need to make the data smaller is we need to say, hey, we want everything by department. So our code needs to go through and figure out the departments. Next, our data needs to go through and say, hey, for the 12 months, what's the count for each of the 12 months? And that needs to happen for each of the departments. So I think it's important whenever we're doing something like this, if you're getting stuck, like I have been on this problem, it didn't come intuitively to me easily, draw it out. As soon as I drew it out in my problem notebook, it was like, okay, cool, this is exactly what we want to do. Let's go ahead now and jump to our problem plan. So just so we have kind of a framework of what we're working with. Okay, let's now kind of devise a problem plan. So if we get stuck while coding a solution, we can showcase that we had a skill and ability to think about this. So first, we need to select our profession. If we look at our visualization, here we go. That's kind of like the first thing we need to do. We need to break it down by profession. And that's given to us here is the department name. That's what's given to us there. The next step we need to do is count, but we can't do that count without a case when. And this is just like a form limitation of SQL. It doesn't have a really good framework to do these like iterative calculations that something like R or Python would really be able to do efficiently. So we're going to need to do a count and case when, and then we're going to need to do some grouping. And honestly, these are the 3 steps. And I really think that this problem is meant to just kind of intimidate you with a big block of text and then these dual birthday, birth month to see, can you think of a quick solution to this particular problem? So this is our plan. This is what I think we should be doing. Let's go ahead, jump back in the code editor and code up a solution. Okay, we have a problem plan. We have helper functions dialed in. Let's go ahead and put together a solution here. And we'll compose it very nicely like we're doing a salad. Every single SQL query I've ever written has had to start with a select statement. Now, this is where the first kind of trick comes in. They use profession as the column name, but we're actually told here in the department, hey, profession is really department name. So we're going to go ahead and just call it department for ease of use throughout the rest of our solution. Not 100% necessary, but just makes life a little bit nicer. And then here is the main crux. Here is the main thrust to help us figure out this problem. We're going to be using a case when, and we're going to say, hey, when your birth month equals 1, we're going to have a temporary value of 1. That's going to get summed together and put all those summations into a month variable. And that's how it works. If that's confusing to you, stick around here to the end and we will go through it in more depth in after hours. Otherwise, we've done it for 1 month. We've got to do it for 11 more. And this is it. This is the main bulk of the problem. Everything from here on out is kind of just a boilerplate. So we have our select, and if you're going to have a select, you have to have a from, and we're going to be using employee list because that is our table name. And then finally, we want to aggregate things together by department. So we're going to go ahead and explicitly tell that to our code. And then just to make everything kind of nice and easy for our interviewer to read, we're going to order it by department ascending, so it's like alphabetized. So if we go ahead and run our code, check to make sure we're not taking any liberties here that SQL doesn't like. Looks like our code runs. Looks like it runs really fast. We go ahead and we check the problem. All green lines, everything looks good, and we are moving on in our interviews. On behalf of Clean Code, thank you so much for being here with us today. Stick around if you want a further breakdown of what this code is doing. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Hello and welcome to After Hours. On behalf of Clean Code, let's get into it. I've taken away a majority of our solution here just to make it easier to see and easier to talk about. I think this is probably the main case where people are going to be confused. So reading this problem inside out is we're using a case when. A case when will go through a particular column, in our case birth month, and it looks for a conditional statement, an if-then statement. And how it understands it as, hey, I'm looking for when birth month equals 2. When that happens, create a temporary value store of 1. Otherwise, create a temporary value store of 0. Now, why do we want to do this? Well, we're wrapping the case when in a summation. So what ends up happening is SQL goes through and it sorts out all of the birth month 2 from the birth month that does not equal 2. And then we're summing them all together. All of the ones are acting as a proxy count for when birth month equals 2. The zeros don't count. And we're going to store it as a birth month variable. This is a really unintuitive way to count your birth months, but what it allows us to do is further aggregate things and break them down later in our problem statement. All right, leave a question if you still need more help. Otherwise, on behalf of Clean Code, see you next time.